Welcome back if you have been here before. Perhaps from the beginning, we're in the middle of the eighth week of gathering together like this on every weekday. And if you're here for the first time, welcome to you as well. In general, early on in the first hour, we usually have a kind of a guided meditation of some sort. Um, Today, I'm going to suggest that we actually sit uh, without any guidance, which doesn't mean that there won't be any guidance, but it won't be coming from me. But basically, an opportunity for you to simply practice with the support of every single one of us, but guiding yourself, perhaps by not saying a word, even inwardly, and just knowing how it is to take your seat and take up residency in the present moment with things exactly as they are, whatever is going on in your life at this particular moment, whether you're alone, whether you're with other people. And we'll sit together. So as we bring this period of formal practice to a close, noticing how it is right in this moment in the body, how it is right in this moment in the heart, how it is right in this moment in what we call the mind. In other words, how is it for you right in this moment? How are you in relationship to your life right in this moment as it's emerging out of the past moment and in some sense or other shaping how the next moment's going to be? So it's really important, I think, for us to remind ourselves that while there are a lot of ways to sort of get lost in the meditation practice, there's no one right way to actually engage in it. And whatever arises is perfectly fine as the curriculum. In fact, quite wonderful, as long as we can hold it in wise relationship and not take whatever arises personally or build some kind of narrative around it, or for that matter, some kind of agenda about self-improvement or anything of the sort, but rather to both cut ourselves some slack and be relatively gentle and at ease with ourselves as we are, especially in those moments where we feel like we may have blown it or lost it, or, every one of us does that. Maybe doesn't even live up to the standards that we think we need to uphold from time to time. And the real question is, how quickly can you pick up on that and recalibrate? How quickly can you recognize what's actually going on and see that it's really not personal, and that when you make it personal, you create a lot of suffering. So this happens constantly throughout the day, and it's very important not to, in some sense, idealize the meditation practice so that you get the sense that I shouldn't have any kind of reactions to stress. I should only respond mindfully, no mindless reactions. Well, if you're human, you're going to blow it constantly, and part of that becomes part of the practice. And I find that that's a very powerful part of the practice, and in terms of my own life and my own occasional contractions around this or that, and see how things arise and contract and so forth. And I remember, I think I've said this before, but at one point, Winston Churchill said, "I've had to eat my words many a time, and I found the diet to be quite wholesome, quite nourishing." And so I'm offering that to you as a kind of reminder that this is not some kind of a idealization or caricature of liberative meditative practice, but it's a kind of opportunity for us to really take a deep look into how we are doing and who we are and how we are in relationship, and then finding a way to navigate that in such a way that the majority of the time, just as when we're walking, it's a perpetually losing of our balance and then reclaiming the balance. So it can become an art form of like losing it for a moment, regaining it in whatever ways that that happens in the family or over, at work or over time or just in your own mind because of the kind of levels of whatever pressure what we're feeling as this goes on and on and on in terms of this uh, pandemic that we're in and the way that we've chosen to take it on as a kind of mitigation retreat, we've been calling it up to this point. And also now that things are starting to sort of stretch open in different ways that are creating all sorts of challenges and problems of their own, to simply be aware that even if you've gotten comfortable with this, nothing's permanent. And even this gathering together, it's sooner or later, it's going to morph into something else or change or end, or we don't know. So very important to sort of really stay in the present moment and remember that life itself is the meditation practice. And we're not entirely writing the script about how this whole thing is going to unfold, but we can respond more mindfully and heartfully in general, the more we're practicing than reacting mindlessly or contracting around particular kinds of patterns in our lives, whatever they may be. So again, the silence in this meditation retreat is kind of just a reminder that the silence is available 24/7 to all of us. And while I do a considerable amount of talking and guiding during these times that we're together, and I hope they're valuable to you, that guidance and so forth, don't forget that the invitation is to always drop underneath where my voice or my words are pointing or what they're offering to the receiving of it, to the invitation to actually connect with your own experience and embrace your own experience in a way that doesn't idealize anything and that allows you to be you and that allows you to care that the most important element of all of this is to live a life of integrity, and the one that's yours to live, not somebody else's. And if you don't know what that is, so much the better, because then you can be in the not knowing and know and appreciate and recognize the not knowing and then let things take care of themselves. And that's the love affair that has been a theme from the very beginning, that this is not a contrivance. It's not some kind of forcing of anything or an idealization of anything. So just a few reminders at in the middle of week 8 of our being together. And we're going to open it up now for questions and comments. Sorry that we had so much trouble yesterday with getting into the small groups. Soren will probably tell you that as soon as a whole bunch of us left, because it didn't look like it was going to happen, then it happened. So there was a certain kind of number, that a ceiling that prevented us all from getting into it. But as soon as some of us left, then it happened. These groups, I feel, are incredibly rich and wonderful. And I love meeting different ones of you when I do manage to get into one of these groups. So tomorrow, after the first hour, we will have another opportunity to try it. And to, let me invite you to just sort of, as I know you do, cut us some slack, because the technology behaves, all of a sudden doesn't behave, and then we're not quite sure how to make it optimal for all of us who care to be on it to make it happen. So, and again, since today was, I think, one of the only days that I haven't done a lot of talking in the guided meditations. I mean, I do a little, I do a lot and so forth, but today was a day where I didn't do any. And we'll probably do more of that as time goes on, because after a point, you know, you're better at pointing yourself towards inhabiting the present moment than I am. And there is a real sort of transfer in some sense going on, or a kind of um, kind of development that's happening in an interior way, so that finally even the idea that we're meditating is just one more idea, and you're completely in alignment with the actual unfolding of your life in no time, in the present moment, and not attached to either outcomes or, you know, even what arises in our own minds in the form of greed, hatred, delusion, reactivity, whatever it is that we think, well, we're supposed to get over that because after all, we've been meditating for so long, however long that may be. And that's, of course, a nice narrative in itself, a nice fiction. So welcome to reality, and the silence is in some sense an invitation for you to navigate the terrain yourself. And just one more reminder before we move into the Q&A. I keep saying this, but I think it bears repetition. The real meditation practice is life itself. It's not sitting in silence, not sitting, listening to me guided or any other teacher guide you in anything. The real meditation practice is, how are we going to be in relationship to the full catastrophe of the human condition, the pandemic, the good, the bad, the ugly, the terrifying, the horrifying. And it's all right in our faces now in a way that's just simply staggering. And the only force or energy that I've ever encountered in my life that has a snowball's chance in hell of being adequate to meet that level of uh, dissipative energy and potentially toxic and destructive energy is the energy of our hearts, the energy of the wakefulness when it is fully embodied and sees through the sense of separation that we all feel from the world, from each other, from ourselves even, and then recognizes that that sense of separation itself is a delusion, and then all we have is each other, and all we have is the possibility of letting compassion and interconnectedness and love drive how we are in the world at every level of how humans are going to be in the world once this epidemic is slightly more in the past. So that's the transmission from me for today. Transmission meaning like on the radio or television, simply that. And again, welcome. I love that we're doing this. I have no intention of stopping anytime soon, but just to remind you that we don't know how things are unfolding, and we're just doing the best we can. Soren, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jon. And again, thanks for the patience with the technology side. We're not always clear why Jon's video and audio comes through perfectly clear some days, and then the next day less so, or the groups. But we're
How
doing
was it today?
Perfect.
No, that's because I didn't say anything.
Even when you said something, perfect.
Oh, good. Okay.
But again, thank you for that. If you have a question or a comment or reflection or something you want to share, if you click participants at the bottom, there's a little hand. And if you click it, it will appear blue and it'll pop up in our screen. And then we can see everybody who has their hand raised and has a question. And we just try and pick people from different parts of life and parts of the world. So please raise your hand if you do have a question. Let's see, I'm seeing Lucia from Colombia. Let's see.
Hola.
Asked to unmute. So, oh, this is a different, yeah, this is a new upgrade I think they just have. So I think you're unmuted now, Lucia.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for this lovely space, not only for these days, but for the future days, because this space will influence our future life forever. Thank you so much. I work with palliative care, and I have had a question for a long time in me. When my brother, who suffered for 8 years of a brain tumor and was in his last minutes of life, I didn't know if he was listening to me or not. I've heard that, I mean, the last thing we lose is our hearing. So I was talking to him, and I just told him to follow like my guidance of the body scan. I realized he was suffering a lot and his breath was too short, and so I just said, if you're listening to me, just let's breathe together. And I began
Beautiful.
doing the body scan. I began from the feet up, and when I came up to his heart, he was in anguish when we began, but little by little he became more peaceful, and when I came up to his heart, he passed away in complete peace.
Wow.
I was so astonished and surprised. I really wanted him to rest because he had been suffering a lot, and I just was in awe. I was completely surprised of the power of this technique and how he was able to little by little be in peace and rest in complete peace. And I have had that experience more than once, not in the same moment I'm doing the body scan, but maybe someone who is very anxious and in the last minutes, I begin doing the body scan, and maybe 1 hour or two later, the person rests in complete peace. And I want to understand a little bit of what really happens in this body scan that is so powerful and can do this.
It may not be in the body scan. It may be in you or in your relationship to what you're calling the body scan. But whatever it is, a lot of it is the power of mindfulness, or you could say heartfulness, because as I've been emphasizing, the two words are the same in all Asian languages. And it's really important to understand the heartful component of mindfulness. And when you are guiding a body scan with the kind of energy that you bring to it, whether it's intentional or whether it's just the love and the care that you're bringing to this other person that you're with, whether it's your brother dying or somebody else who's in a lot of pain, you're in some sense inviting a spaciousness and a peacefulness that goes beyond the pain in the body, for instance, or even the pain in the mind. So it's not like you're trying to get rid of the pain in the body or the pain in the mind that sometimes just from our thoughts or emotions or whatever. But when you create a wide enough space for it to all be present, then you've probably had this experience, and many other people have as well, you can actually be in a huge amount of pain in the body, and at the same time not have it be a problem, because you're, in some sense, the awareness is so much bigger than the sensation that you're able to hold it without having to go into battle around it. And then even in intense pain, there's a certain kind of peacefulness. But nobody understands. To answer your question in a different way, nobody understands what's really going on in the body scan. This will take an enormous amount of technology to be able to monitor people while we're going through something as complex as a body scan, including what's going on in the brain, what's going on elsewhere in the body at a molecular level, in all sorts of different ways. And maybe we don't even need to understand it. Maybe your presence and the caring that you bring to palliative care and to the work that you're doing lets people feel secure enough to actually just relax into whatever their experience is, whatever it is, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, whether they're fully conscious or even semi-conscious or even comatose. Your presence there influences them in ways, and as you say, since the hearing may be the last thing to go, you can trust that they may be hearing you, and not just the sounds, but the whatever it is that you're really delivering to them, that they're feeling that, and that is helping them in one way or another to take refuge. Another theme that we've been emphasizing for the past 8 weeks, to actually be at home, even in the midst of the unwanted and the terrible. And I bow to you for doing that kind of work, because when we're all on the way out, on the sort of glide path into dying, none of us want to be alone. We want kindness and caring. The irony is, at this moment, we're not allowed to be with the people who are dying because of the pandemic, because of the virus. So even under those conditions, it's very, very difficult. And I don't even know how you're doing this work at this moment unless you're doing it remotely. But just a deep bow to you for your caring and for your question, which there's no really good answer for.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I had always had this question because it has happened to me not only once.
Yeah, multiple
And
times.
yes, I have even done it remotely, Once the mother of a patient called me. It was a Sunday. I was at home, and I didn't have time to go and be present with her daughter, and she was used to do the body scan with me because she had taken many sessions with me. So she just put her on the phone.
Great. Yeah, sure.
She just put her on her phone, and she was telling me, the mother was telling me, yes, she's becoming calmer. She's bringing some peace to herself. And like an hour or two later, she passed away in peace. So I wanted to listen to you on this, because it was something that I thought in me, is this casual, or am I imagining this, or what is it? Or is it so powerful that it allows people to pass away in peace, which is something I think we all want to.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, to repeat what I said, I think part of it is you, and part of it is that particular practice when
Mm.
it's invited in a really kind and present and non-goal oriented fashion, people feel met, seen, heard, felt, even in very difficult moments. So thank you for raising your
you.
hand and voicing your experience, because I think it reminds all of us on this, like the thousands of people who are on either Zoom or YouTube at this moment, and thousands more who will watch it in the future, that there's a lot we don't know. But that doesn't mean that we can't have profound effects, even though we don't know why we're having such profound effects. So thank you, Lucia.
Thanks to you.
And
Thank you
good
so
luck
much.
and be well.
Thank you.
Next I'm seeing Stephen Moore. Stephen, let's see. Welcome. Where are you calling from? And do you have a question or comment or reflection? I believe you're
Thank you, Soren.
Yep.
And thank you, Jon, for hosting this for the past 8 weeks. I've been with you every day.
Wow.
It's become a part of my daily routine. I'm a formal student of MBSR at the University of California in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And I took that class 5 years ago at the Osher Center with James Mitchell. I'm sorry if I say, I'm calling from Palm Springs, California. And I also want to thank our global community. It's I've broken up into the small groups a few times, and it is a very powerful experience. And I've wanted to ask this question for weeks, but I haven't raised my hand. But I finally got the courage to raise my hand, and it's something that I have brought up in small groups. I'm a 32-year survivor of AIDS, and I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. And that's pretty much what pushed me into the MBSR class at UCSF. And I do the body scan. I do it quite often. Since COVID-19, I'm sure you can imagine, with living 32 years with HIV and AIDS, yeah. I've experienced a lot of health problems, a lot of losses. The COVID-19 epidemic has exacerbated all of my PTSD issues around HIV and AIDS, living my life in 5-year increments, not knowing what was going to happen next. I'm having a really hard time sitting in silence doing my meditation. I find that guided meditations are working better for me right now, but I really am trying hard. Like today, it was really hard to sit in silence because my mind is just flooded with all of these thoughts and concerns about COVID-19. And, 32 years later, after dealing with all of this, now for this to come along, it's like, right, bring it on, bring it on. So I'm asking Jon, if you can speak to that element of fear that allows all these thoughts to just flood my mind, where in the past I've been able to pretty much successfully sit in silence and meditate.
Well, I mean, what you've shared with us is so articulate and so remarkable and so beautiful. I mean, that first of all, it really merits my receiving it in the kind of enormity and the beauty of the spirit in which you're sharing it. And
thank you.
It's not surprising that this is triggering, and I use that word intentionally, triggering all sorts of traumatic stuff from the past, because you've already been through like nightmare after nightmare after nightmare and survived And from the look of you on my screen, thrived somehow in amazing ways right up until now. And then like you needed this like a hole in the head, right? And no one needed this. And yet here it is. And so it's in part that we kind of continually have it put in our faces that the narratives that we use to describe our life and to make sense of it, they just sometimes work for a while, but they're not like long-term, sort of complete. And so it's totally natural that you should be fear. I mean, both from the PTSD kind of elements of it, and also the very real fear of being vulnerable to, this god awful virus that seems to have a lot of different ways to kill somebody. And I don't say that to make you more depressed. I say that, to sort of remind us all, and you and especially Stephen, that those thoughts that seem out of control, they're workable if you are willing to do a certain kind of work with them. And so in a sense, I'm glad, even more glad, I could say that I chose to not say anything today, which is very unusual, as you can see, because there are so many people who are like new to the practice or whatever. So I feel a certain kind of responsibility to guide people through this. And it sounds like what you're saying is when I'm guiding or when someone else is guiding, you feel more stable in the whole thing. But left to your own devices, the thoughts just kind of. So I'm very happy that I actually did that today just for you, because this is kind of like where the rubber meets the road. You have these thoughts whether you pay attention to them or not, because they're going to come at you in a lot of different ways. So the real challenge is, how can you befriend them and recognize that those fears don't have any kind of better angle on the future than happy thoughts or anything else, that they're just thoughts. They're not the truth of anything. And when you can remember that almost on a moment-to-moment basis, then you can actually play with just letting it be as it is. And you've got every reason to sort of suspect that you're capable of handling it all, because look what you've handled in the past. And so maybe in that sense, and I think in some sense our work is never complete. It's always like, oh, I think I got that one under control. And then all of a sudden it comes up 30 years later, and blindsides you in a certain way. It's like, well, okay, welcome to the club. This of being human, and what worked for us in our 40s is not necessarily going to work for us in our 70s, because we're in a different universe and because we're really, in many ways, different people. So I don't know how reassuring that is, but I hope it's reassuring. It's meant to be reassuring in the sense that, yes, of course, you have to be cautious, as we all do. So we have to kind of titrate or walk a very delicate line about how we are going to move out into the world in whatever ways we're called to as this thing continues to unfold. But at the same time, you've got a lot to going for you. At the same time, you have a lot to protect and be cautious around. And there's no reason why you should be fearful as you're protecting and being cautious around. Why not be gentle and caring for yourself at the same time you're being cautious and taking very, very sort of careful steps for figuring out the way all the rest of us are, what the hell world we're walking back into that will never really be the old world that we left and we thought we had it down. So that's the practice itself. And then silence is no longer your enemy. It's not a problem. If you want guided meditations, they're all over the place. So you can give yourself what you feel you want, but don't make silence kind of oppositional or the enemy or a fear place that you don't want to go, because silence also has enormous amount of wisdom and healing in it. And I don't think you want to turn away from that.
No.
So I've been emphasizing over the weeks that this practice is trustworthy. It'll sometimes surprise you, and you will surprise all of us that we'll sort of lose it. But what is the it that we're really losing? And the present moment, in some sense, is always a branch point. We can go this way, we can go that way, and we can bring awareness to the branch point and then choose what feels right to us in our heart. And sometimes it may be, I don't need any more silence. Then practice in whatever way nurtures you in the best way. But if it's avoiding all these thoughts because you don't want to deal with them, then maybe you could stick your little toe in the water as you did today, because it hit you. You didn't know this was coming. And so that's a kind of, you get your little toe in the water and then maybe the whole foot. And then maybe you see that it's not silence that's a problem. It's your relationship to your thinking. And that's always fungible. That's always workable. That's always something you can work at, not making your thoughts a problem. And there's a huge amount of research supporting this for major depressive disorder, which is, as I've said before, a disease of thinking. And the soap bubble way out, so to speak, is to not get trying to replace one negative thought with a more positive, la-di-da type of thought, but to actually see the nature of thinking and that it's not the truth or who you are. And then it sort of liberates itself like a soap bubble, and you don't have to. Now, it might take some time, okay? Might take 20 minutes to recover from something, especially if you get messed up with it and, really start to blame yourself for something or other and then come down hard on yourself. And I wonder, I mean, I certainly do that. I mean, lots of people, we are too hard on ourselves. And so a kind of gentleness in befriending even difficult thoughts liberates those thoughts, but much more importantly, it liberates you. Is anything that I'm saying here resonating with you in a way
Oh,
that
yes.
you recognize?
Oh, yes. I thank you so much. Very helpful answer. A beautiful answer. I think I haven't taken my medication today yet, okay, which consists of about 18 pills. This is the best medicine I will have today, this week, this month, what you just said to me. And I say that from the bottom of my heart.
No, I can feel it right through the screen. I mean,
Thank you.
no
I wish I could
whatsoever.
reach to the screen and just
Hey,
hug
I'm
you.
going to just give you a big virtual hug right here.
Me too. Me
Um,
too.
and everything that I've said, it's just the tip of the iceberg. And you have it all already. So I'm just reminding you of something you already know in your bones, even if you can't remember it, as most of us can never remember it in our heads, but we know it in some deeper way. And so I just kind of, really moved to meet you, and really glad to hear that you're a graduate of the UCSF MBSR program, which I have visited on a number of occasions. And I really have a lot of respect for the people working there and doing what they do. And I'm just honored to meet you like this and wish you absolutely all the best going forward. Not in some kind of woo-woo so idealization way, but in a very, very real way that, the kind of wisdom that even allows you to ask that question is something that's really trustworthy. And I wish you another 36 or 2 times 36 years on this planet.
You as well, and I can feel it, Jon. I can feel it from my head to my toes, and just very strong in my heart. So I can't thank you enough. Thank you, Soren. Thank you, Jon, and thank you to the global community out there.
Well, thanks for joining. I mean, we're just getting to know who we are collectively, and it's very beautiful to really hear from you and to be able to feel you through this technology.
Thank you so much. God bless.
Right back at you.
Well, Jon, it's 59 minutes after the hour.
That's right. I mean, here we have done it again. Probably 50 or 60 hands up that we can't get to.
Quite a bit. I'm making a small dent every day, though. So
let me remind folks before we sign off in the way we usually do by saying hi and goodbye with the gallery view. Let me just remind you that in a way, the question and answer piece here is in some sense to remind you that we can do this with ourselves. That since we'll never get to the end of the questions, I've been emphasizing over and over again, the answers lie within us, right next to where the questions are coming from, because they're different forms of the same intelligence. And the not knowing becomes a really important part of it, because I'm not talking about mere concepts or mere thinking or mere clever intellectual responses. That's not what this is about at all. This is about trusting our multiple intelligences and really giving ourselves time and space to actually let the questions just percolate inside yourself, and maybe keep raising your hand, and 3 weeks from now, Soren will call on you. I don't know. But in the meantime, let the question work inside of you and listen very, very deeply for what emerges. Because very often they clarify themselves. They're self-clarifying if you get out of mere